Okay, I'll try this again. I was trying to make a video review on this knife and I thought I was recording and I wasn't. But this is my Cold Steel 4max. It's the US made version. And I've used this knife pretty much exclusively since I've got it. I've carried, some other knives with me at the same time, but I've pretty much always had this knife on me. And I absolutely love it. The edge retention on it and blade steel toughness has been quite surprising. I think it's safe to say it's considerably better than some of the other blades that I've got in CPM 20 CV, and certainly one of my Benchmades that I've got in M390. This one's been obviously heat treated with a better heat treat protocol. It's held its edge a lot longer and it's definitely been tougher. I've done everything that I would with a knife with this thing next to using it in a hunting application. I've done cardboard cutting, I've cut up vegetables, I've done woodworking with it, I've hacked through 3-4 inch diameter tree branches and stuff with it, and it takes everything I can throw at it in stride, and it's performed flawlessly. I did sharpen it finally after a lot of use. This time I used my Edge Pro, sorry, not my Edge Pro, my Work Sharp with the blade grinder attachment, and I put about a 20-degree angle on it. I set the blade grinder attachment for 20 degrees anyways. It took a long time to grind that and get a good burr going and get everything decently even, the best I could. I probably spent about an hour on this blade sharpening it versus, typical 15 minutes to do a blade of this size. My belts, obviously, we're not fresh, but still, it was tough grinding. In comparison, 3V and other blades that I've done on that Work Sharp were night and day easier. Like, no comparison. But it sharpened up, quite easily. It just took time. It wasn't hard to get a good burr on it, other than the time involved with it. There was no real challenge as far as pulling a burr and knocking that burr off. Some steels, they do tend to be a little more problematic to get that really nice, clean, crisp edge. But I definitely didn't have any issues with this one. I think sharpening on a conventional stone would be challenging unless you had, really good sharpening skills. And then, of course, you'd need, really high-end sharpening stones that were able to cut, that high wear-resistant steel. So, a ceramic type stone, or I can't remember the other names of it, cubic boron or whatever the heck they are. I've got a couple of stones that will cut this, shaped in glass stones and stuff like that. But even then, I've read that sometimes, those stones, depending on, whose opinion you're going off of, they don't always, people don't always agree that they will cut these really high carbide steels because of the vanadium carbides in them being like 70 Rockwell or something like that. So you kind of get stuck needing, diamond to really cut those carbides down and sharpen them, because some people theorize that you're pushing around those carbides right on the edge rather than sharpening, so you're either tearing them out as you sharpen or you're just pushing them back and forth because the abrasive material is not hard enough to cut them. I don't know if that's the case. I've got steels like ZDP 189 and things like that where people say they're really difficult to sharpen. I haven't had any real issues with them, to be honest. I haven't really had anything that I haven't been able to sharpen with what I've got. I don't have any experience with some of these steels like Maximat, or I can't remember the other one that's getting some attention right now, or some of the other really, really high carbide steels like Rex, Rex 45 or anything like that, or CPM 10V or 15V. I've sharpened my CPM 110 V Spyderco Military without any issues. That one, you could start to tell that the edge was not going to be as crisp as you know, something like you would get with M390 or CPM 20 CV. But so far, this knife has been absolutely fantastic. And then the other thing too is Cold Steel's coming out with, or has come out with already, a budget version of this folder called the Formax Scout. So this knife has CPM 20 CV. It has titanium liners. I think all the lock back mechanism, like the lock bar and everything else on it, the whole knife is titanium except for the blade. And then you've got G10 liners. So there's a lot of expensive materials in this blade. And the Formax Scout is using this Grip X, or I can't remember what they call it, but like a nylon or glass fiber reinforced type scale over a steel liner, and obviously a steel lock bar, and I think a G10 or some sort of synthetic material here for the lock back part. And the blade steel, of course, is not 20 CV, it's AUS 10A, which is actually really a decent steel. It's very tough, and it does hold a really good edge. So it's going to be interesting to see how it, you know, fares, and, you know, the reviews and stuff like that. But I think it's probably going to be a really, really good knife. You know, sadly, it probably takes away some of the exclusivity of a US made Formax, or even an Italian made Formax, by coming out with something that's, you know, 90% of what this knife is at a fraction of the cost. But I don't know, it's such a good knife. I mean, I think, you know, my impression of it, if more people got to have one because it was made more affordable, I mean, I think that's a win-win. It's really, you know, honestly, it's my favorite folder that I've got. I can't say anything but good things about it. It doesn't carry heavy in my pocket. I mean, you know what's there. It's not a light little, you know, Spyderco or anything like that. But once you start using it and you get used to the size of it, it's one of those things. I mean, what's the saying? Once you go big, you never go back, sort of thing. But, you know, everything you do with it, the size is an advantage. It's not a hindrance. I mean, if you're cutting wood, I mean, the control you have with this blade versus a little blade like my Spyderco PM2, which I've got here. I mean, this blade is, it's a good little blade, but I mean, my hand, I mean, I can't even, it's a not that big of a knife, right? So I mean, if I'm gripping something, I mean, and I squeeze it, I mean, I can feel it almost flex in my hand a bit. So I mean, if I'm doing anything that takes a lot of effort, like I'm cutting away at wood, or, you know, carving with it or something like that, and you're pushing, doing a push cut, and you're twisting or doing anything like that, this is not a knife that really lends itself to that kind of work. It's just, it's a sturdy little knife, but it's not tank like this thing. Like this thing, I was cutting, well, not cutting, but cleaning out lap joints on 4x4 pressure treated wood. I mean, I was getting in there and I was just, you know, pushing down and using it like a chisel and torquing bits of wood and stuff out. And I've hacked through, you know, 4-inch diameter tree branches. I've cut cardboard, you know, and feet upon feet on feet and feet and feet of cardboard, breaking it down. And the edge on it has held up so good. Like, I mean, I cut a bag of dog food open, and I ended up cutting through the bag and going right into my dog's cage, which is metal. So the wire part on it, and no edge damage. I couldn't believe it. So 20 CV, you know, has a reputation in some knife circles as being a really chippy steel, or maybe not that tough. This is more than tough enough in my experience for what I've been doing with it, and I've not been easy on it. I just love this knife, and I can't say enough good things about it. I mean, Andrew Demko, who designed this, I mean, he really knocked it out of the park, in my opinion. I mean, this knife, when I first got it, I was like, oh man, you know, it's going to be a huge folder. How practical is it going to be? You know, this is overkill, blah, 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 blah. You know, all those kind of thoughts sort of rattled around in my mind about it. And once I started using it, it's just like, holy crap. You know, this thing is just awesome. This, I mean, nice knife. If all you ever had was this, you'd be happy. You wouldn't know any better. You get this thing and you just start using it. It's like, holy crap, this thing just is awesome. It's big. It's not cumbersome. It's not awkward. It's not dangerous because it's size. You know, everything just works about it. It's an absolute pleasure to use. I mean, I honestly, I would be happy if I had no other folding knife but this knife. The only reason I would choose another knife to go in my pocket, to be honest, is the size. That's the only time if I was wearing something that putting that in my pocket just didn't make sense, or I was doing something that, you know, I don't know. I mean, I don't live a lifestyle where I need to go work in an office, you know. Unfortunately, I don't have to worry about, you know, not being able to carry a knife like that in my pocket. But for somebody who needs a knife and uses a knife every day, that isn't sitting in a office setting, that this might not fit for their lifestyle, I mean, you can't go wrong with this thing. So I think that Formax Scout coming out is going to be a real hit. I'm going to end up getting one if I can. Yeah, so this knife is special to me, being a US made Formax. It's not an Italian made Formax. Not that there's anything wrong with them. But when I bought this, I bought it because it was the US made one. And I knew that they weren't making them anymore in the US. They were only being made in Italy. And I know there was some issues with fit and finish on these, you know, for a couple of releases and whatnot. But this one's flawless. I've got no issues whatsoever, no complaints. Everything seems to be perfect. As far as I can tell. In some of my other videos, if you watch them, you see where I tore this thing down and went over it, and, you know, just did a few things trying to smooth things out a little bit. Not that it needed it, but just to play around with it, you know. So if I end up getting one of those Formax Scouts, I will carry it just like I do with this thing. I'll put it through the same kind of use and tests that I've done with this thing, and I have no doubts that from what I've seen and what I've read of that knife, that it will hold up, you know, every bit as good as this knife will. And the only thing that it won't do as well is obviously cutting highly abrasive materials like cardboard and stuff like that. But, you know, what it lacks in wear resistance, it will also, you know, get a heads up, as, you know, a leg up per se, as far as sharpening ability. So as long as it's not considerably heavier than this, I don't think it is. I mean, it's obviously going to be a little bit, but it can't be too much heavier. I mean, there's no real negatives, you know, other than that now there's going to be more people running around with a Formax than there ever were. So I'm not the only kid on the block that has one of these anymore, or won't be long until that's the case. I still might be the only kid on the block that's got, you know, a US made Formax, but gonna probably lots of these ones running around in the Formax Scout version of it. So yeah, it's an awesome folder, guys. You can't go wrong with it. So I would buy a Formax Scout in a heartbeat if I was looking for a large folder. I don't think you're gonna get a better one. It's just everything about it is, to me, perfect. You know, the finger choil on it, I know there's this thing, but I mean, I've never used it. I mean, there might be a place for it depending on your hand size or whatever, but I've got knives with finger choils and not one of them have I ever used. I mean, to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense to have a bigger blade and a finger choil, just because it puts the cutting edge further away from your handle and creates more of a leverage as far as, you know, what you're cutting and stuff like that. But yeah, I really, 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 really like this knife. And, you know, for anybody out there that doesn't like cold steel or has something to say about it, you can say all you want, but this knife kicks ass. Like, absolutely kicks ass. Andrew Demko, who designed it, knocked it out of the park. I don't have the AD10 version of this, but same thing. Everybody says the same thing. These knives are just phenomenal. So I will rave about this knife for years and years and years, because I will never get bored of it. This knife, I will tell you, I get bored of it. It just doesn't give me that same kind of thrill every time I use it that this knife does. Every time I put this knife to work, I go, man, this thing's flipping awesome. You know, it's a knife to behold and use. You just use it and you're like, man, this thing's freaking cool. It just brings a smile to my face. And if you guys got one of these, I'm sure it will for you as well. So check out the 4 Max Scout, because it's a really economical version of this knife that is 90% of what this knife is, and this knife is absolutely awesome. Yeah, anyways, thanks for watching, guys, and hope you enjoyed the video, and appreciate the thumbs up, and we'll see you in the next video.